believe in the gun. And our players don't use it most days. They use it every day.
In my 20 years as head coach, I've used the gun every single year. Well, my dream as a coach that everybody would grow up with the gun, because getting all those reps would make my job a lot easier.
Hello, everyone. This is Tom McDonald with the NABC Championship Webinar Series. I'm the 2-year college rep for the board of directors, and I've also worked for Championship Productions for like 20 years. Really a special thanks to the NABC staff, Jim Haney, Reggie Mitten, Troy Hilton, Eric Weiberg, and Rick Letty, and the rest of them. They've all been so supportive and helpful social media-wise, point us in the right direction, things we need to get done. The gun for sponsoring these all of these presentations from these coaches. Sideline Interactive is going to give, they got to us and wanted to give away something gives back to the coaches. One table, 8 feet long, LED, free shipping, over $11,000 value that somebody's going to win at the end of this thing. Craig Reed from KBA, they have been sending marker boards, clipboards, magnetic boards to coaches that are quarantined, can't get back to their offices, just to help their presentations or things that they may need from the presenters. Mike Bray, board of directors, the president, past president, and then the new president, Jamie Dixon. Unbelievable support, encouragement. You know, we were going to have, and Coach Acuff spoke in Las Vegas. He was unbelievable. He's one of the best guys on the court. And then we had the clinics we had in the fall were well attended. And then the ones we really were zeroing in on with all the help of the board of directors was the 5 that we were going to have this spring. And after this pandemic and COVID-19, these webinars have really gone, they're perfect for everybody. It's been unbelievable feedback. Championship Productions, Bill Bergen, Nate Landis, Daryl Bennett. With that, my warmest, or I get to be the lucky guy to introduce all these coaches, but the next one has been an honor to get to know with his expertise on the court and then all the different levels. And I think he really hits home with all the coaches we've ever had on these things. But, you know, he's at Belhaven, Barry, Alabama, Huntsville. He did an unbelievable job there. And now at Liscum, to be 9-7 coach in the conference and 16-16 your first year, that's a great, great achievement. 11 times in the NCAA tournament. His career record is 549 and 329, 60%. Some of the things that I think are really important on the others, 8-time regular season champion, 3-time tournament champion. Like I said, 11-time NCAA Division II appearances in the tournament. 2 NCAA Division II South Regional champs in 11 and 12. 4-time NABC District Coach of the Year. 8-time GSC Coach of the Year. And the one that really sticks out to me shows his dedication and commitment to this profession. NABC member for 33 years. Warmest welcomes to Lennie Acuff, Liscum University. Coach, how's things going?
We're hanging, Tom. I hope everybody else is. Thank you for the opportunity to do this. I've really enjoyed getting to listen to so many great coaches. And it's one of the reasons I was going to talk about offense, but I just think there's been so many guys that are so good technically. I just thought maybe I'd go a little bit of a different route. And but you've had an amazing group of coaches and some guys that have been fantastic for the last 2 weeks. So congratulations on that, and good for the NABC.
Well, it's definitely good for the NABC. And Troy's been on until today. But it really helps us with membership, and you know all about that. You've been in those meetings. And then also just about awareness, who we are. We've talked a lot about the Benevolency Fund. We've talked about just what all of you coaches, I mean, if you look at our list of coaches that have been on these things, it's just a who's who. And like I said, anytime you've spoken at a clinic, and you've always been so unbelievably gracious to say yes, that your topics are unbelievable. So you have done videos on the 4-out, 1-in, and the 5-out, correct?
Yeah, and think you guys have them with Championship Productions. Yeah. And, so, anything I can do to help or share. I just thought sometimes when I talk, it gets kind of monotonous, and I think I might probably confuse people more than I help them. So I didn't want to do that today. I thought I would just look at some things. I've always wanted to do a clinic. I said, a lot of times when you talk about what you've learned in coaching, you talk about things that worked. I'd always said I've screwed more things up than I've gotten right. So I thought I'd share some things that maybe help some people along the way, and maybe think about some ideas that deal with the art of coaching.
So let me give you my first question. Okay. And you're an educator. I know from just being around you. So most of the coaches are on here are educators, teachers, coaches. So who's been in your background, parents, fellow coaches, peers, that really helped set the table, pave the way for you to be where you're at right now?
Well, that's a great question. I was going to talk a little bit about that as we get going. I just think for all of us, there's just people that invest in you and that make such a difference. And, obviously my dad's my hero. He was the first guy I ever played for. I always thought he had great insight, great perspective. And he really, I'd say a lot to our guys, in order to be a man, you have to see a man. And my dad was that. And then my high school coach, I played for the same coach from the 7th grade to the 12th grade, Danny Petty. He was one of the best high school coaches ever in the state of Alabama. And then, as I got into college, at that time, there's some irony to me coaching at Lipscomb now, is Don Meyer was a guy that for a lot of guys that really have been lifelong basketball guys. I think Don Meyer, he was a coach at Lipscomb for 17 or 18 years. And Coach Meyer was just, I think, the greatest teacher that ever lived in the game. I learned so much from him. I think I've got 10 notebooks in my office of nothing but notes from him. And, but just so many people poured into me, and I'll talk about that. And just the opportunity that we have as coaches to hopefully affect and invest in the lives of young people.
Coach, my next question is, this pandemic, this COVID-19, how's it, what are you doing with staff development or your staff with this, your current players, and then recruiting? What do you utilize?
Yeah, it's been challenging to say the least, but now understand we're dealing with first world problems here, okay? There's a lot of things that are a lot more desperate than us not being able to sit in front of each other in a staff meeting or being able to see our players in person. But we have tried to really strike a balance from staying in touch, being engaged with our team, but also not just wearing them out. I'm a big proponent, and I was going to talk about this a little bit, that it's just a long season. Really under 2 weeks ago, we wouldn't have done a whole lot with our team. We actually lost to Liberty in the finals of our conference tournament the first Sunday in March, and we would take 2 weeks off, and then we would start back in the weight room. And it would probably be last Monday before we got back on the court. And so, but I have an amazing staff. They're unbelievable people, and they're really good at what they do. So we communicate regularly. We do a Zoom call with our team once a week, and trying to incorporate some things in terms of leadership there. We've got some good ideas from some other coaches. And the thing that I've tried to do is communicate with as many coaches as I can. I've been in a couple of Zoom calls with guys that are with self-development or professional development. I've got another one on Thursday I'm really looking forward to. And I as much as anything for me, and maybe this is a little different, but I've really made myself sit down and watch all of our games. Sometimes you don't like watching your team play. And I felt like I really needed to delve deeply into our team and to figure out, okay, what are our deficiencies? What were the things that maybe we can continue to build upon for where we're going?
Coach, you were at Huntsville, Alabama Huntsville, for 23 or 24 years?
22, yeah. And this
22.
Just finished my first year at Lipscomb.
So then you go to Lipscomb and you start all over again. A lot of these coaches that are on this telecom or the webinar are going to take over a new job. So what was the biggest challenges going from a place you've been for a long time to taking over a new program?
Well, I think anytime you go somewhere new, every situation's a little bit different, but I had been at Huntsville for 22 years, and you really had things in a manner really from everywhere in your program that you felt pretty comfortable with. So it was challenging, but I really got to coach a great bunch of kids. The thing that was really unique about our situation, they had been to the NCAA tournament 2 years previous, had been to the finals of the NIT the year before, had been on an amazing run, the best team they've ever had in Division I basketball. But we lost 7,700 points, and which was the most in Division I this year. Not there really wasn't even a close second. And then we lost 2 guys that started in our first scrimmage we lost them after 5 games to medical redshirt. So there was nothing easy about it, but there was many times you just have to say, we got to get the plane landed. I mean, that's the bottom line. We just had to keep going. And, it was also my first year coaching in Division I, and I learned a ton there. So it was challenging, but I thought very healthy for me.
Coach, I'm going to turn it over to you. I'll monitor the questions and answers over here for you.
Okay.
And this topic is best things I've ever seen in coaching. I'm going to turn it over to Lennie Acuff. Coach, if you need anything from me, I'll be back to you throughout, okay?
Okay, great. Thank you. And anybody that's watching, first off, I appreciate you taking the time. I don't feel worthy to be on such a clinic as this, but I'll do the best I can. And please, I think probably to be better, the more questions I get, because I do think there's that 5 and 45 rule. I think if you find what I'm saying interesting, that 45 minutes is not long enough. But if you don't like what I'm talking about, 5 minutes is probably too much. So I'll try to strike a healthy balance there and see if we can't maybe get you thinking a little bit. As I shared earlier, I've always wanted to do a clinic where I talked about the things that I've done wrong or the hard lessons I've learned. I say we grow old too soon, but we grow wise way too late. And I know that I've learned an awful lot from the things that didn't go well. And so I thought this would be a good time to share some things. And I just finished my 30th year as a head coach in college, first at Division I. And I was reading something the other day on leadership and life reflection, and it said if you look at life at 50 the same way you did at 25, you probably wasted the last 25 years of your life. And I thought, wow, that was really deep for me, and I agree with that. I mean, because goodness gracious, have I learned a lot in the last 30 years of coaching. And I hope for all of us, really, the way we look at maybe life and things in perspective from just 6 weeks ago has really changed us. I will tell you, Tom was nice enough to say some things that we've shared some ideas or share some accomplishments we've had. But I will tell you this, it doesn't matter what sport you coach or how you do it. There's a million different ways to skin a cat. I know I've got my tail beat a million different ways. Every time you may think, hey, we may have this thing headed in the right direction, the game will humble you. And I think for us, it's just, always understanding that people with big egos usually have little ears. I think that the most dangerous words you can ever say as a coach is, I've got this. I think you always have to be constantly evolving. And I think to survive in coaching now, you have to be willing to change. You have to be willing to adapt. And I think we've tried to do that, and it's worked out pretty well. And the other thing is, I mean, the reality is, and you guys have watched a lot of these clinics, I mean, you're just not out coaching guys. There are so many good coaches at every single level, and you're just not going to outcoach people. You really have to try to do the best you can, and to do what you feel confident with, but also understanding, at some point you're going to get humbled and the game is hard. I do think coaching is probably 15 to 20% technical. How we play, what do we run on offense, how are we set up to play defensively. But I think the most important part, I think 80 to 85% is the art of coaching. How do you manage people? How do you create a culture? And at the end of the day, how do you help kids and your staff be the best version of themselves that they can be? And so that's what I really wanted to talk about today, was the art of coaching and things that I think have helped me along the way and the lessons I've learned. I think as you get into this, and Tom asked me early, who affected me the most and, who was the biggest influence on my life. And I thought about guys that as I got into it, who were so kind to me and were willing to invest in me. And I think you have to figure that early on is, who are you going to listen to? Who are going to be the guys that you say you understand have been in this a while, but they really, at the end of the day, have your best interest at heart and will tell you the truth. And there's just a lot of people that have poured into me, and I'm so thankful for that. And I talked about Coach Meyer and the effect that he's had on me and the way I see the game, and to have a chance to coach at the school he built one of the best programs in the country at, and to coach on Don Meyer Court every day is really humbling. And then, Jimmy Tillett. Jimmy is a dear, dear friend, and I'll talk a little bit about some of the things I learned from Jimmy. I had the opportunity to coach Jimmy's son at Berry College when Jimmy was the head coach at Samford, and I think Jimmy is he's as good a basketball coach as I've ever seen, but just so wise in the way he's poured into me. Kevin Stallings has been a dear friend, and I think an amazing offensive coach, and he and I really shared a lot of good ideas. And a guy I just had a phone call a little bit ago, Dwayne Rebo, that was at Birmingham Southern, actually is going to Samford as an assistant coach. Just his willingness to share and help me. And then, and I'll tell a story about Joe Dean Jr., who shared an idea with me I've never forgotten. And so those guys sure mean a lot. And I think that when you think about who you're going to listen to, I think it's also equally important that you figure out who you're not going to listen to. It's amazing as we've kind of gone through this pandemic of you hear some of the healthcare people frustrated because a lot of people that don't know a lot about healthcare trying to tell them how to do their job. And I think a lot of coaches can understand that. And I've come up with a list of the people I think you shouldn't listen to. I think you always should be leery of that guy that knows everything, has never done anything. I think there's that guy in every group. He's the guy that we didn't get to play in college because the coach didn't like him. Or, he's that guy that's always willing to say, well, I tell you what I'd have done. Well, no, you really don't. I think you don't want to take advice from somebody you wouldn't take criticism from. Make sure the people that you're listening to have your best interest at heart. Be leery of anyone who has strong opinions about things they know very little about. That guy that can sit in the third row and coach your team better than you. You can't listen to that guy. I think it's healthy to have a pulse on what's going on around your program or where things are, but you just can't listen to people that don't know a whole lot that don't have a lot of information on what you have going on. And then the guy that can always say that, I tell you what I'd have done. Well, those people say that when they don't have a dog in the fight, when they don't have all the information. I think you really need to be careful and listen to those people and understanding that, this is a tough profession, and you need to always remember, we always have to remember, but for the grace of God go I. I mean, I just hurt so much for people now that have lost their jobs in this business. Who knows where all this is going to land with our sport and our profession. But I know this: if you have a job, you're fortunate. If you're getting a paycheck, you're fortunate and you're blessed. And just be real wary of thinking that, you won't listen to people that really don't have your best interests at heart. I think also the one thing I've really learned the longer I've done it is don't compare your situation to others, because comparison is a thief of all happiness. Every situation is different. And, I work for the best AD in the country. Philip Hutchinson is as good a man as I've ever been around. And he shared, we were talking earlier this year, and he said, yeah, if you think somebody's got the perfect life, you obviously don't know them very well. Every person has their struggles. Every family has their struggles. And every job has its challenges. There's obviously a lot of jobs better than others, but there's a lot of jobs that are extremely, extremely challenging. And so, but always remember, for the grace of God go I. And that's why I hope as coaches we continue to encourage and support each other and really to walk through tough times with each other. I referenced Joe Dean Jr., and I try to share this story every time that I speak. Is my first year at Alabama Huntsville 23 years ago now. Joe came up he was the athletic director at Birmingham Southern, and he came up and we went to dinner, and he shared something with me I've never forgotten. And he said, Lennie, as you get into this, he said, in your first year and as you build your program, he said, you need to get your groundswell going the right way. And I had no idea what he was talking about. And he explained the theory behind it. And at the end of the day, it really was this. He said, anytime someone comes in contact with you or has an interaction with you or somebody in your program, that's your one shot to make a first impression. That's it. And he said, if that impression is good or their interaction is positive, they're going to tell 3 people. If that interaction is negative, they're going to tell 7 people. And he said, and what you want to do is you want to create a positive groundswell so that 3 turns to 6 and 6 turns to 9 and 9 turns to 18 and 18 to 36. And he said, then what you've done, you've created an insulation from negativity. He said, you have created an opportunity for people to deflect negativity coming at you, or things that would normally get to you if you don't have positive groundswell. And then he said, but always remember, if it ever starts going against you, if you ever get negative groundswell, it's one of the most difficult things to stop. And I've never forgotten that. And I see that a ton in our business when you see guys that things start getting away from them, and you can tell, boy, it's getting rough in the community, it's getting rough on their campus, it's getting rough in the media. That is a really difficult thing to stop. And I think whenever you take over a job, your interactions, the how you deal with people, the way that you make people feel is so important, because once it starts going against you, it is really, really tough to get turned around. And I think having awareness on where you are on that spectrum, I think that knowing, okay, hey, we're in a good place. Maybe we can push the envelope a little bit. But if you've got a lot of negative groundswell, then, maybe we might not need to take that kid this year. We may need to give that a year. I might need to not go see my AD about that right now. I might need to get a little bit more leverage before I go do that. Because at the end of the day, in this business, it's all about leverage and, what kind of position you're in. And I'll never forget him sharing that with me. Also, listening to other people, I think you have to give your staff permission to be honest with you. And that's something I've really learned a ton about this year, going from Division II to Division I, having more coaches on my staff and having more guys that have opinions, and they're a little older than most of the guys that have worked for me in Division II. And so they're going to have a little stronger opinions, and they're going to, but they need to be able to express those. And I hope that, that they have put themselves in, that I've given them the permission to speak truth to me, because at the end of the day, you don't need to be listening to what you want to hear. You need to hear what you want to hear, what you need to hear. And I know the guys that work for me, my 4 assistant coaches, have just been incredible. They've been loyal, but they've also challenged me. And a lot of things that really helped us turn the corner with our season was just because of their being real transparent with me. And I'm so appreciative of that. I do think this, no matter what job you take over, you're only going to be as effective as the level of support that you're getting from your administration. There's good jobs, there's tough jobs. And I just think it's like the law of the lid, the John Maxwell law of the lid. The organization can never rise above the level of leadership that exists within that organization. And, having the opportunity to work for the right AD, having the opportunity to work for the right president, it changes everything. And if you get the wrong one, or you end up in the wrong circumstance, a lot of times we look at jobs, okay, is this a stepping stone job, or is this a destiny job? Coach Meyer used to talk a lot about the difference in stepping stone jobs and kidney stone jobs. And a lot of that's reflective on who you work for. And I've really been fortunate to have the opportunity to work for the athletic director I'm with now and the president I'm with now, Dr. Randy Lowry. And they've just been really good to me. And I'm so thankful for that. I do think as you get going in this stuff, if there's young guys listening, I think you have to know that there's a big difference in being born on third and hitting a triple. As you get into this business, some of us have to go a different route than the others. I took an NAIA job when I was 25 years old, and it says, oh, well, you're a head coach at 25. I mean, it was a really, really, really difficult job. I was a master negotiator. I ended up getting $20,000 to be the head basketball coach and the head golf coach. And so it was a job, honestly, the reason I got it, nobody else wanted it. And for me, I thought it really, I learned so much, but I knew that if I was going to make it and have a chance to stay in this business, I had to maybe go a little bit of a different route. And so I had to take a job that maybe no one else was really willing to do. I do think the staffs that you hire, the people that you allow to be a part of your staff they're it. I mean, they're the key. I've seen so many people, particularly at a higher level, lose their jobs because of the people they allow to be on their staff. I can't tell you how thankful I am and appreciative of the quality of men I've gotten to work with, starting back 30 years ago. And I'm so proud of those guys. And, my first boss was a guy named Tony Engel. And I want to talk about Tony. He was, and I want to be separate from what I talked about people that affected me. Tony Engel was the guy that gave me my first job. I was an assistant coach out of college at the University of Alabama in Huntsville. And Tony told me, he said, you can get whatever you want out of life if you help others get what they want. And I've never forgotten that. And I learned more from Tony Engel in 1 year about the business and what true work ethic was. It was worth 20 years for me. And his wisdom and knowledge was incredible. And I just think for me, having somebody that could speak that truth into me really made me understand the importance of staff and being able to get the right guys around you. I do think, a big issue now in coaching is dealing with parents. And I know that, a lot of high school guys particularly, and even colleges, you're always, parents are having an effect on what's going on. It's just going to be a matter, is it going to be positive or is it going to be negative? In college, you don't deal with it quite as much. It's just in a different way. But I will say this, I've become a lot better coach because of raising children of my own. My son's a college baseball player. My daughter played at a high level of volleyball in high school, won a state championship. And I think at the end of the day, for all of us, I think a really important question we need to ask ourselves is what I want my son or daughter to play for me. Because if you don't think a coach is important, wait till one of your children has to get one. That you'll figure out what a big deal that is. And so I always try to keep that in mind as I coach other kids. When I coach kids, is that's somebody's son. And would I want my son to be treated that way? Would I feel comfortable with my son being in my program? And I do think I learned a ton about that, just seeing my children having different coaches and the experiences they had. And I think also knowing that the best part of all this is seeing the effect you have on kids. And I know when I got into this, I'd hear guys say the best part of the job is seeing your players come back and being able to share, positive stories and then being able to live out their dream. That is far and beyond the best part of what we do. Just the opportunity to have impact and help have those kids. Just, I tell our guys every year, really all this is about is let's just try to make memories. Let's just try to make memories. Let's put our best foot forward. So when all this is over, we can say, man, that was a lot of fun. And we made memories that we'll have for the rest of our life. And I think when you can help create a climate that's possible, you're doing a really good job. And I would challenge you with that. I do think this, and everybody says, well, what's been the difference in going from Division II to Division I? Winning is hard at any level. It is really hard. I don't care where you coach. I don't care what level you coach. Winning is hard. But I do think, and I'll share this story, like as we got going this year, things weren't great. And I told our guys on numerous occasions, we have to embrace hard. Like it's not supposed to be easy. And, that was kind of our reference point for a lot of the season. And we got into the conference tournament in the first round, and everybody that coaches basketball knows tournament basketball, it just goes up a whole nother notch. And at halftime of our first round game against Florida Gulf Coast, I think they're up 1 or 2 points, and they were playing really well, and they were playing hard, and I thought we were playing hard. And I walked in the locker room, and I felt like we were surprised that we were in like this really hard game. And even though I wasn't surprised, I thought they had a good team, and I thought they were well coached. And I told them, I said, this is supposed to be hard. I mean, that's what makes it fun. And I think so. If we understand, no matter where you are, winning is hard, and never to take it for granted. I think that as we understand how hard it gets, humility becomes a big part of our life. I think, now in a lot of areas that you see with the society we live in, humility is almost a superpower. I do know this. I mean, it's just the minute you start thinking you know everything is the minute you're getting ready to get hit right in the mouth. We all have to have a sense of humility about it. and knowing that this whole deal is really, really hard. And I think it's also important that understand how hard it is for everyone. You know, if you're in a situation that's more advantageous for others, don't forget that. Understand there's a reason that some of these guys are struggling, and we can be there to encourage them. Talking about taking jobs, I'm kind of, from experience, I think I've seen good and bad and opportunities that come different people's way. And the three things that I think you want to think about before you take a job, you know, when you get involved in jobs and people trying to figure out what they're going to do, is I think the first thing, particularly if you're thinking about doing it in college, can I pay the bills? You know, I've seen some coaches take jobs that just really, they put your family in a really, really tough position financially. And at the end of the day, I'm not sure how healthy that is for anyone. Can I enjoy living in that town? I think it's really hard to be somewhere that you're just trying to get out of. I'm not sure you're going to do a great job. I'm not sure that you're going to really be able to provide the equity that the program needs if you're always trying to get out. And the last thing is, can you finish in the top four in the league? Do you genuinely have a chance to be in the top half, top four of your league? And if there's any hesitancy to any of those three jobs, all things being equal, I mean, I understand there's times you have to do what you have to do. But if all things are equal, I think those three questions are ones you and your spouse or whoever it is need to figure out if that's what you really want to do. I think that we had a lot of success at Huntsville, and a lot of times it gets overlooked as something that happened right away. I mean, I was there 22 years. It takes time. It just takes time, and you have to be willing to go through the hard times to get to that. But I think the best thing about it for me, and I think the reason we really were able to be successful, is I didn't go there to leave. I wanted to make sure that whatever we did was foundational, that we could do it the right way. You know, I was on a walk yesterday and talked to Jimmy Tillett for a while, and we were talking about shortcuts and compromise, and he said something I thought was fantastic. He said the longest distance between 2 points is a shortcut. And I thought, wow, there's a lot of wisdom in that, because I think a lot of times, just for the sake of trying to win, we'll take shortcuts. And at the end of the day, I just think a lot of those things end up catching up with us. I think it's really been fascinating. I'm sure a lot of you guys have watched the Chicago Bulls, the Last Dance thing that's been going on. And you know, I think when you see the whole process, how the kind of the sausage was made behind the scenes, I think it's interesting on guys that they decided to take and not take. And a lot of times when we're sitting in staff meetings and we're trying to decide, okay, do we take this kid or that kid? And, you know, no one's perfect. There's guys that have issues. We all have our stuff. And kind of my litmus question for always the staff is, are they better than their problems? I think that for us is one thing that we really try to figure out. Okay, are we willing to take on this person's complications or baggage? And are they better than that? And if not, we probably are going to try to stay away from them, because we want to try to have a program that's built with a foundation of core values that I'll get to in just a little bit. The approach we've taken, and we're going to take the same approach at Lipscomb, and we took for a long time at Huntsville, is we want to be a developmental program. We want to be a program that we can improve players, that we can, you know, that our guys are there 4 and sometimes 5 years. We were really fortunate to have a situation in Huntsville where we could redshirt kids, and that was huge for us. And, you know, the approach that I always talk to our staff about is, let's coach next year's team this year. Let's coach next year's team this year. And if we have that in mind, I think it allows us to be a little bit more developmental have a little bit more developmental mindset. I think it allows us to be more patient. I think it allows us to continuously try to grow guys in the weeds. And what I mean by that is, you know, if you bump into a coach, particularly in college, and you say, well, tell me about your team next year. Well, he's going to usually tell you about how many starters he has back and how many people he signed or who he signed. And the third component we always want to add to it is we want to have guys in our program that we're growing within our program that can really be impactful. That when we play somebody next year, that they say, where did he get that guy from? Well, he was here. And it was because, you know, that young man was committed. And he was really willing to work, and they did a good job of making him better. So I think having a mindset of coaching next year's team this year has been something that we've kind of tried to embrace. I think in recruiting, the thing, and again, now recruiting is the most inexact science on earth. You have to get lucky. You have to hit the right buttons at the right time and be in the right place at the right time. But again, it's the most inexact science there is. But we do talk a lot about trying to figure out, do they like it, do they love it, or do they live it? And I do think if you get guys that like it, you're going to be probably average at best. If you get guys that love it, you have a chance to win games. If you get guys that live it, that's where you win championships. And I wish I could give you this magic formula of knowing which of those three categories a kid is going to fall into. But I do know as long as you're in a situation that you're trying to get guys to love it or to live it, you probably have a low ceiling. It's just almost impossible to be able to grow that way. And so that for us is something we're always looking for. I know every sport's different, but I think in basketball, I think if you get two guys that can play at a level above where you are, you have a chance to win a lot of games. It's just impossible to win if you don't have a couple of guys that can just go do it at another level. And I'm not saying go from being a D1 guy to an NBA guy, but if you're at a low to a mid-major, I think you really have to have a couple of guys that can play above that level. I think for the high major guys, I think they need a couple of pros. And I think if you never get three of those guys, you have a chance to win championships. Two that can play above it, you can win. Three, I think you can win championships. I've had guys ask us, what do we look for in a recruit? The three things that we're always trying to figure out is, do they fit? Do they have feel for the game? I think feel and vision are the two hardest things to teach. And in basketball, I don't want to try to help a kid have feel. It's really, really, really difficult for me to do that. I'm not a good enough coach to do that. And then our whole thing is, does he love it and live it? If we can get guys that fit, that have feel, and that are willing to live it and ultimately be just gym rats, we have a chance to be okay. I think we can be competitive and have a chance to have a team that I enjoy coaching. I do think there's outliers. I think in coaching, all of us that's done it for a while, we have a story of a guy that you're like, I don't know, the first time I saw him, I thought, that's my guy. That guy right there, I don't care what anybody else thinks, is my guy. And I really do think if you ever get one of those guys, stick with him. If you say that there's just something about him that I think he can get it done, stick with him, because trust your instincts on that. And you're not always going to get it right, but one of the best players, if not the best player I've ever coached, was a kid that was a 6'1", 140-pound kid out of high school that nobody wanted. He had one scholarship offer, and it was us at a Division II school, and he's played in the NBA off and on for 3 years. And I mean, nobody wanted him, but there was just something about him. Now, I never dreamed he'd be an NBA player. I'm not saying that, but I do know this. I do know that he was absolutely, he had it. And I think for us, continuing to find guys that have it. I know for what we're trying to do now, and my assistants have helped me with this in terms of Division I recruiting, I really like guys that are good on the phone. I think it's hard when you get a kid on the phone and after that first conversation, you're like, I just don't know. I just don't know. I most of the time, that first interaction, a little bit like I talked with the groundswell, is getting guys that have a little bit of it. And at the end of the day, our kind of default has been these two things. I think you bet on character and you bet on production. If you really believe they're high character kids and they've produced, I think that for us is where we kind of get off the fence on guys if we're going to go or not go. I think it's really, really hard to bring a kid in, and I know it happens, different situations, but I think it's really hard for a kid, if he's never produced, say if he's never been asked to be a scorer, to ultimately be a great scorer. I just think we're always going to default to kids that have produced. Just my offensive philosophy or my overriding philosophy on the game is I think it's a guards game. And I've had some good teams. I had some teams that weren't as good. I've never had a good team with bad guards. I think any team that achieves at a high level, they have elite guard play. And so it's with that in mind. I know this doesn't really affect high school coaches, but for us in college, what I like to do is we really want to recruit a point guard in every class. And, you say, well, the math doesn't work. That means you end up with 4 point guards. I hope so, because, some of my best teams, if we've started 3 perimeter players that were all high school point guards. And I just think it's almost impossible to have too many guys that know how to play on your team. Because really at the end of the day, you are who you can guard. And if you can get a 6'2" tough kid that can guard a 3 or can guard down, then we're going to play him. And so I just think for us, trying to make sure that we have adequate guard play. Now, I understand every situation is different. Everybody sees the game differently. But what we really want from our players from an offensive standpoint is I kind of morph into that. And Tom, if there's any questions, I'll be glad to ask them. I answer them. I'm just kind of rambling here.
Good. I got some for you, Coach.
Okay.
All right. Let's see here. I'll start with the very first one for the day. What advice would you give a beginning coach on how to improve and advance in the coaching world?
Yeah, great question. I didn't know much about the organization Rising Coaches. And I've been listening to some of their podcasts and some of the ideas that they have. And I think if you really want to do this, I think the first thing is you need to be willing to say, I'll go work anywhere and I'll do anything. It's like, here I am. There's no job too small, no job too big. And I think having the maturity and responsibility to go do that and say, hey, that is going to be my way to get in. I'll do whatever and go wherever.
Wondering if Coach is going to discuss the 4-out, 5-out. I'm a JV coach in really small rural school looking to build fluid players and basketball IQ. I'm not from the area and see how much sets and et cetera, not much creative basketball.
Yeah, we'll talk a little offense at the end. I think that I will say this. You've got Chris Mooney on in a couple of hours, and Chris Mooney is an incredible offensive coach. He's an incredible coach and a better guy. He will do an unbelievable job talking about offense, I'm sure. I'm not even sure what he's talking about, but if you want to watch really good offense, watch those guys. But now one thing I think in terms of offense, I think I do have a strong belief in being able to flow from one layer of offense to the other. And actually the clinic that I did for you, Tom, out in Vegas, I think we talk about that, and there's some examples of that on that video.
And I put Championship Productions on the message board, so you have that too. But I would say the coach is a very modest coach. Everybody, before I even knew him, said this guy can really coach the offensive end and the defense, and just a really good teacher of the game. So his presentation in Las Vegas and other places, I think you were at the Tennessee Coaches Association clinic too, Coach?
Correct.
I mean, he does an unbelievable job on the court. So when that thing gets done and is out, we'll make sure that every coach knows about it. A man of faith, what do you do to control or mentor your temper or anger in athletics when coaching or losing on the player and officials in more the norm?
Great question. I do think I think it gets a little bit, hopefully, as you mature. I do believe this. Every game, every play can't be the apocalypse. And I've really learned the hard way that your players and a lot of times the people in the stands are going to feed off you, your body language, how you deal with people. And I've really just tried to always understand, hey, there's a lot of eyes on you. And I think you can really get in a bad way if your emotion becomes too much. I've really tried to stay away. When emotion is present, a lot of times rationale goes out the window. So try not to get into that too much.
All right, going back to this, the same coach about where there's a good place to start. How many layers is too much to an offense? When would you add ball screen, strictly dribble drive offense?
Yeah, that is one thing I think, like Tom, you guys have created kind of this monster, which I think is awesome with these clinics. But there's so much good information out there. You can do anything you want. You just can't do everything you want. You got to pick and choose here on what you want to decide you want to do. I think to answer the question, though, I know for us in college, I don't know if that's a high school coach or whatever, but I think you want to make sure in college you have all 30 seconds of offense accounted for. That for us is a big deal. We want to be able to, we talk about winning the first 6 seconds of the possession. If we don't score in the first 6 seconds, and let me kind of back up a bit. I think you have to run offense with the end in mind. Okay, what are we looking for? I think you need to define that for them. What do you feel like we're hunting at the end of the shot? And then also, how can we go from transition offense and flow without having to hit a reset? That's a big deal for us in offense. I think you're on mute, Tom.
My fault. How can you give someone, or what kind of advice can you give someone just to stay, like they want a chance to be in coaching, probably in college coaching? What kind of advice do you give them just to not quit and give up, just stay the course?
Yeah, I get that question a lot. I think if you can just figure out somewhere around where you are just to go volunteer and just say, hey, just show up and you've got to have an in obviously somewhere, but just when you get that opportunity, make the most of it. But I think the best way is the way I got into is working camp. Just find camps, find as many camps. And I always say, if you want to know something learn about a coach or a young person, let them work your camp. Like I hired a guy right out of camp about 9 or 10 years ago, just because I thought he was that good. He was a young guy. We hired him as our GA, and he was incredible. But it was just because of how hard he worked in camp. He was a lot of people work camp for social aspects. I mean, this guy came to work, and that was important to me. I think working camp is a really a good opportunity for a lot of folks.
That's how I got hired, right out of camp.
Yeah.
Coach, the next question comes right from camp. What suggestions do you have about running a good camp? Tips for running a good camp?
Oh, great question. And I talked about learning things with your children. And because I was from the Coach Meyer mold, I was going to teach fundamentals to the kindergartners for 4 or 5 hours every day. And then my kids started going to camp, and my own children, they didn't like it. And I finally figured out, well, if they're not having fun, they're probably not going to come back. And so the way I've approached camp is we really try to make sure that we teach the 4 or 5 things that I think you can improve in a week. The ability to dribble, pass, and shoot, and give them things they can work on when they leave there. But until they get into about the 6th grade, we're trying to have fun, because I think if they have fun, they want to come back and they want to keep playing. I don't want them to have a taste in their mouth where they say, I don't care if I ever see another basketball again. But then I think in the 6th grade, that's when we start calling what we have advanced fundamental camps. And that's when I think 6th, 7th grade is when rubber hits road for kids. That's when you got to start figuring out, is this what I really want to do?
Coach, you had unbelievable run at Huntsville. So when did you get to kind of that one level, and then you wanted to take it to the next level? What kind of things took place to get it?
Yeah, great question. It was 10 years ago. We say, being lucky, we signed 4 kids in the same class. None of them had any other scholarships, and that group of kids won 108 games. And it was because we had 2 elite guards that are both pros now, a big kid that played pro, and an unbelievable glue guy. And when we got those 4 guys, they changed our program. We were able to go from being regionally competitive to being nationally competitive. And we were just really fortunate. But I do think a lot of the equity and a lot of things we were building in our program paid off at that point.
Let's see, overall program. Here's one. You mentioned your athletic director, the one you have now. Considering, What do you take into consideration when taking a job? I know you talked about it a little bit. For example, you mentioned your current AD. Why did you decide to work for him?
Yeah, I trust him. I mean, our AD could run a Fortune 500 company. He's incredible. He's smart. He has amazing integrity, and I trust him. And I felt like he wanted me to be the coach. I really felt like he was somebody that there was a kindred spirit with. We were like-minded. I love. I mean, he's a basketball guy too, and that really helps. And but not to the point he tries to coach our team. He's just really supportive, and it's really been a blessing to work for him.
What criteria would you use in bringing a ninth grader up to your play varsity? What role would you think about parents should have in their decision?
Oh, great question. Kind of the rule of thumb I've always had, even with my own son, if you're going to move up, you need to make sure you're going to get to play. To move up, I like to go from a ninth grade to the JV or JV to varsity. Make sure you're getting to play. But I do think I think honest feedback going into that deal, saying, look, now if he may be the eighth person and eighth player on the team, if that needs to happen, then have that conversation. I do think that the way you deal with that on the front end can save you a lot of problems on the back end.
What do you do to teach your players about your team, philosophy, and values?
Great question. And that'd be one of the last things I hit upon. We have 6 core values in our program. And I think when the core values that we try to incorporate are things that for us are things that are going to last a lot longer than their life. Than their basketball life, than their basketball career. And our 6 core values are being selfless, thankful, humble, driven, committed, and responsible. In my 30 years, I think if you have those 6 qualities embedded deep into your program, you have a chance to have a program that can last a while. But the most important thing is when those guys leave there, if they have those 6 qualities in their life, they have a chance to go be productive, and they have a chance to be a good husband and a good father. And that really is what your culture is. Your culture is not, well, we don't turn the ball over, we don't take bad shots. No, that's how you play. Your culture is the things that you give those kids that they can take with them for the next 70 years of their life that enable them to really hopefully affect other people in the right way. And so, like, again, for us, that's being selfless, thankful, humble, driven, committed, and responsible. I don't know if you had any other questions, Tom, or anything else.
You hit 2 of them. There's only 1 left. Do you want to talk about offense at all before we adjourn?
Yeah, I just real quick, I'll say a couple of things, and I'm sorry if I didn't get to that very much. I do know this. If you can't score, it's a hard game. I'm stating the obvious, but our philosophy has always been try to recruit offense, and you can teach defense and coach defense. I do know this year we struggled at times offensively, and we really, really had to bust our tail to become a lot better defensively. I do think shooting is the great equalizer. We shoot an enormous amount of shots every single day. I think you make shots that you expect to get. I think you make shots that you work on in practice that are relative to your system and your offense. And we really don't cut corners there. Like for us, having guys that can dribble, pass, think, see, that is such a big deal for us. And at the end of the day, too, we want guys that can think. I think a lot more games are lost than are won. And so trying to figure out for us, what do we need to do to make sure that we can score enough points to give ourselves a chance in postseason.
Coach, I think you answered every question and more than you could have. Let me look one last time. You want to just mention what your 6 cores are one more time, and then that's it?
Sure. Our core values are selfless. If you ever want to be miserable, just go be around somebody that's selfish. I mean, they make everybody around them miserable. Selfless, thankful. I think our guys really need to understand it's a blessing to be able to play college basketball. Selfless, thankful, humble, like I talked about, that's a superpower now. Driven, committed, and responsible. For us, I don't think maturity is anything to do with your age. I think your maturity is all about being willing to take responsibility for your actions. And we talk about that all the time because there's a lot of blame game that goes on now. Coach,
thanks for your time. I appreciate it. Stay safe. Take care of your wife and family. We got Chris Mooney is going to talk about 2-guard Princeton offense in an hour from right now. Get some rest, Coach. Stay safe.
All right, Tom. See you, buddy. Thank you.
Thank you for everything.
My pleasure.
Bye-bye.